Welcome back guys, and in this video we'll be exploring loops. Alright guys, so the only loop in Go is the for loop, and we can use a for loop to execute a piece of code multiple times. So let's go ahead and make a basic for loop. So first I'm just going to type for, and now we're going to give our for loop 3 statements. They might seem a bit complicated at first, but it'll be easy to understand once we're done. First we're going to initialize a counter variable. So I'm just going to type I equals 0. All this does is create a variable named I with a value of 0 when the for loop initially starts. And we have to use semicolons to separate our statement, so I'm just going to go ahead and put a semicolon right here. Secondly, we're going to give a condition, and our for loop will run as long as this condition evaluates to true. And if the condition is false, the for loop will stop running. So I'll just put I less than 5. This is going to make our for loop run until I is no longer less than 5. Thirdly, we're going to modify the loop counter value. And this statement right here will be executed after every iteration of the for loop. And by iteration, I just mean every time the code in the loop runs. So I'll just put I++. So this will increase I's value by 1 after every iteration of the for loop. Alright, so now we just put curly brackets like this. And inside of our for loop, I'm just going to type fmt.println I. Now let's go ahead and run the code. And as you guys can see, numbers 0 to 4 were printed. So I was created and given a value of 0 because of this statement right here. And I's value was increased by 1 after every iteration of the for loop because of this third statement right here. The for loop's code ran until our condition in statement 2 was no longer true, which is why the for loop didn't run once I was equal to 5. Because if I is equal to 5, I is no longer less than 5. We can also use continue in our for loop. So let's just go right here. And let's just type if I equals 2, curly brackets. And then inside of our if statement, let's just put continue. And what continue right here will do is end the current iteration of the for loop and go straight to the next iteration. So let's go ahead and run the code so I can show you. And as you guys can see, 2 wasn't printed. That's because when I was equal to 2, this continue statement right here was executed. And the continue statement ended the current iteration and just went straight to the next iteration. Which means that when I was equal to 2, this print line statement right here wasn't executed. We also have break, so let's just delete continue right here. And let's put break. And what break does is end the for loop entirely. So let's go ahead and run the code. And as you guys can see, nothing was printed after 1. That's because when I was equal to 2, the break statement right here was executed. And the break statement exited the for loop entirely. Let's try making our program count to 100s in 10s. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this code right here. First, let's just delete this condition right here. And let's type I less than or equal to 100. This will make our for loop stop running when I is greater than 100. And instead of I++, let's put I plus equals 10. And this will increase I's value by 10 after every iteration of the for loop. Now let's go ahead and run the code. And as you can see, our program counted to 100s in 10s. That's because I is being increased by 10 after every iteration. And our for loop is going to run until I is no longer less than or equal to 100. Something else we can do is create a for loop with only one statement. So let's go ahead and delete statement 1 and statement 3 right here. And let's just put this back to I less than 5, just like this. But we still need to declare our I variable somewhere. So let's just go right here and type I equals 0. And then inside of our if statement, let's just type I++ right here. This for loop is just going to run until this condition is no longer true. Now let's run the code again. And as you can see, this for loop functions exactly the same as the code we had before, but we only have one statement in our for loop. We can also make our for loop run indefinitely. So in order to do that, all we have to do is just go ahead and delete this condition right here. And since there's no condition, the for loop won't stop running unless a break statement is executed or the program is terminated. So let's just go ahead and run the code, and it's going to keep running forever until we stop it. So I'm just going to press Ctrl+C to force the program to exit. We can use for loops with the range keyword to iterate over slices, arrays, and maps. We've covered slices and arrays in a previous video, but we'll be covering maps in a later video. So as you guys can see, I have a slice of cities right here. And we're going to use a for loop with the range keyword to iterate over each city. It might sound complex, but it will be easy to understand once I show you. So let's just go right here and type for I, city, equals, range, brackets, cities, just like this. Then let's just put curly brackets. And inside of our for loop, let's just print fmt.println I, city. Now let's go ahead and run the code. And as you can see, 0 London was printed, 1 Tokyo was printed, and 2 Toronto was printed. So let's break down exactly what's happening here. So when you use range with a for loop like this, the for loop is going to run once for every value in the array or slice, starting with the value at index 0. The index of the current value is going to be stored in this first variable right here, which we named I. and the actual value itself is going to be stored in this second variable, which we name city. We could name these two variables anything we wanted and it would still work the same. Let's try edit our code so we only print the city name without the index. So let's just delete I from our print statement right here. Now let's go ahead and run the code. And as you guys can see, we got an error I declared and not used. That's because we've declared the I variable right here, but we haven't used it. And in Go, you can't have unused variables. But what we can do is just replace I right here with an underscore. And what this underscore will do is tell Go that we don't need this value. So now let's just run our code again, and as you can see, only the cities are being printed. Let's say we want to only print the index and not the values in the slice. All we have to do is delete comma cities right here, just like this, and then let's just put back I. And then instead of fmt.println city, let's just make it fmt.println I. Now let's just go ahead and run the code again, and as you can see, now we're only printing the indexes. So earlier in this video, we used continue in our for loop. I'd really appreciate if you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can continue watching my videos.